what does he say in it? Let's get running or something like that?
Let's get running.
Let's go. I just felt running.
Let's
go running.
The running man, famous for Arnie saying, I just felt like running.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. I just need a really quick wee-wee, then we'll crack on.
I need to do a wee-wee, yeah.
I did my wee-wee.
Hello.
Was that...
Hello.
What do you mean, hello? Wait, is this the intro? No, hang on, you haven't done this Off Radar yet.
Oh, no, I'm doing it right.
He's saying hello. He says hello. He doesn't go, it's Off Radar. Hello, I'm James Smith. Welcome to my party. Everyone's invited.
Right. I am James Smith, and this is our party. We've got James Eatock here.
Hello.
Our Neil Brock here. I called him Nige.
Yes, Nige, Neil, whatever you want to call me, I'm here.
Today, we're back again for another episode. If you haven't listened before, this is how it works. We talk about a film that we have recently watched, suggested by one of us or you guys, in this case James Eatock. We watch it, we chat about it, and then we give our review out of 10 at the end of the episode.
Quite a hard concept to get your head around, you know.
I just want people to stay till the end.
Yeah, of course, yeah. What's it going to be? Yeah.
So The Running Man is the film. It came out in 1987, directed by Paul Michael Glaser, written by Stephen King and Stephen E. de Souza. And it's worth pointing out straight away that Stephen King wrote the book in 82.
Whoa. Stephen King did not write the book, I'll have you know. That is a common misconception. It was actually Richard Bachman that wrote the book.
So I thought that it was released under his name, but actually Stephen King wrote the book.
Well, it's a little bit of a cheat because Richard Bachman is actually Stephen King, but it was basically...
So there we go.
So what he tried to do was he was never sure whether he was successful because of the quality of his writing or because the first book was a smash and everyone just bought his books there on in. So he sort of arranged a deal with his publishers that he was going to write some stuff and publish it under this sort of pseudonym or whatever name you want to call it, Richard Bachman, without any kind of marketing push to see whether it would be a success. I mean, that's the kind of thing that only someone who's extremely successul can do.
Yeah, Rowling did that recently, I think, with one of her books, didn't she?
You don't want to mention her name on this podcast. Suddenly we'll have all the controversy and things will go into meltdown. We don't need that. But regardless, unfortunately, it kind of leaked out before he got to really, truly experiment. And Stephen King has obviously done a lot of very kind of famous films. A lot of his books have been adapted. But he did try and keep his name off of The Running Man in terms of being part of what sold it, but unsuccessfully, as James Smith is still aware, even though...
Absolutely aware, and if you go on IMDb, it's got Stephen King as one of the writers, so that gave it away pretty much immediately. Also, well, you know who this stars. One of the biggest action film stars of the 80s and
Jesse
90s,
the Body Ventura.
No, Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac.
Kurt Fuller.
Kurt Fuller is back. It's the Kurt Fuller podcast. Scrap every other film.
If you haven't listened to Wayne's World, that's totally lost reference. Kurt Fuller is in this film, and we spoke about him in Wayne's World, but it doesn't quite star him. It stars.
It may as well do because he is.
Yeah, well, he is big.
Scene stealing.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the main man in this film, plastered all over the artwork, the poster, and it's why you watch these kind of films. It also has Maria Conchita Alonso in, starring alongside him.
Good job, Smith, getting it right. I know,
I couldn't believe that.
I was waiting for that. I was like, here we go. It's going to be Maria the Conqueror.
To everything, everywhere.
Oh, I know. I'm so looking forward to that.
Yeah, so when did we first see this film? I take it we've all seen this one before.
I must have been like really young when I saw this, so like young teens, I would have thought. But then I actually caught it on TV not that long ago, maybe like a year or two ago on ITV4. It always seems to be on ITV4.
Always on ITV4, yeah.
As do many Arnie films. But I realised watching it on that occasion that I'd never watched like the opening sort of 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, wow, this bit. I'd only ever remembered the bit, obviously, when they're in the Running Man game show, which we're going to discuss. Yeah. But the bit beforehand, I was like, what the hell is this bit? I always just thought those two guys are like his mates in it, were just two randoms they kind of threw on him. I'd never realised they were like imprisoned together.
I think I saw like a really dodgy, VHS pirate copy, but like respectable enough that it wasn't like filmed in a cinema. It was just like
was it called The Jogging Gentleman?
The Jogging Man. But yeah, it was. I remember watching it back then and just really enjoying it, because that was obviously like 87 was like the height of Arnie, and it was obviously still he hadn't done T2 yet and all that stuff, and Eraser and all those classics. There was still so much more to come. But Eraser. There you go.
Hadn't done True Lies. Let's say True Lies.
True Lies, yeah. So I remember a lot of these films, a lot of the Arnie ones especially, around that time, being heavily marketed as video games. So you'd buy your computer game magazine, like back in the 80s and 90s, there was Computer and Video Games, which was affectionately known as C&VG. And then you had like magazines like Mean Machines and all these magazines. And the beauty of that is you'd get these magazines and it would be like, you'd get a poster, it's the movie poster for the video game. So that was almost like your entry point into a lot of these games as a child or as a youngster. You'd be like, oh, the Running Man video game, which I had on my Amiga A500. It was an incredible intro because they had moments where Arnie goes down the chute and is like digitized. You're like, oh, look at the great. Seriously, I'm not joking. It was mind blowing at the time. We were all just like, oh my God, have you seen the intro to the Running Man on the Amiga? And you look at it now and it's like, oh my God, that's so bad. But at that moment in time, you were so used to just basically like block sprites.
It's funny you mentioned like computer games and stuff. Like the Running Man, as you mentioned, there was the Amiga title, but it actually inspired a game called like Smash TV, which was like a really big hit.
Oh, that's right.
In the early 90s as well. Yeah. So, and then it also went on to inspire kind of the creation of American Gladiators, which became Gladiators in this country. I think we even discussed a bit of Gladiators on a previous podcast.
We most definitely did.
Yeah. I think it was on the Gremlins episode.
Quite possibly, yeah. But there was kind of that overlap, albeit, there's not like the mauling and killing and kind of stuff we get in the Running Man, but there was definitely that sort of hunger at that time for kind of people to just be sort of going up against the people like Arnie, these almost like superhuman, like massive bodybuilder type style people, and so it's got a lot to answer for. Whether that's good or bad is obviously dependent on the person.
Amongst my group of friends, it became the movie that we all quoted from the most, because this has so many Arnie one-liners that I can just blindfolded, whatever, just remember instantly. It's hilariously wonderful with all its one-liners, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, I saw this very young. What about yourself, Smith?
I'd probably not quite as young. It's probably one of those ones that, like late teens. So like, I don't know, like 18, 19. I remember firstly watching Terminator 2. So that was like,
Oh, wow, that's your entry point. Yeah,
a bit later. So that was like Terminator and Terminator 2 were probably my entry to Arnie, and seeing Terminator 2 kind of blew my mind at the time, like when I was 15, 16, and I was like, wow, this is the greatest film ever made. And then obviously then you kind of go back and like revisit Arnie, and then I think over the years watching the Running Man, like similar to you, Nigel, in the sense I watched it young-ish, haven't watched it for a long time, caught it on ITV4 about a year ago, and then obviously you've suggested it, to watch again. So yeah, no, it's good to revisit this, and good to do another Arnie film that's not Red Heat.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, Red Heat was a film that he did directly after The Running Man.
Oh,
so it
really?
feels like we're going kind of back in time from Red Heat. So
I was blown away. So at the tail end of last year, start of this year, there's this channel, like a streaming channel, an app that you can put on the old Amazon Fire Stick and various other things, called Pluto TV. And Pluto TV has just like a load of channels, and they're dedicated to just one or two shows. So there's like literally the Baywatch channel, and it just shows Baywatch episodes over and over again. There's like one called Comedy Classics, and they show Laurel and Hardy, and I was watching a lot of that like tail end of last year. I was like, I love a bit of Laurel and Hardy, just like loads of Laurel and Hardy films. And there was one channel which was the Starsky and Hutch channel, and I was like, oh, Starsky and Hutch, I remember like vaguely watched it, and I was like really enjoying it. I'd be working and it's on in the background, and I watch it, and I know who's in Starsky and Hutch, always have done. It's just one of those things that kind of, I guess, gets handed down to you. And then I'm watching The Running Man, and I've seen this film numerous times, and the credits come up and it says directed by Paul Michael Glaser, and I was like, that's bloody Starsky? I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
I was like, and I had to double check. I was like, no, it's got to be just like similar name. Like, oh no, it's the exact same name. It's him. He directed.
I was going to say, there's going to be someone listening to this being like, where the hell is Etok going with this story?
I was going to.
Yes, and it comes round to like, actually, Detective Dave Starsky, I should say, directed The Running Man, and it's like, I don't think he really did anything else after this, not of any note.
In the year 2017, an innocent man accused of a crime has a choice: hard time or prime time.
Sensational. Perfect contestant. I want him.
He must pay or play the Running Man.
On your mark.
I'll be back.
Go!
James.
This will only be like, okay, James Smith.
I don't know why I called you James.
That's right, James.
I ever had. That's like if I ever call my mum Barbara.
I was going to say,
what's her name? I only ever called her Mum.
Oh, dear, that was good. Right, so The Running Man. The synopsis for this, very short, very easy, is set in the dystopian future. I always love this in films, of the dystopian future. 2017,
which is now the past. It's kind of weird.
Well, no, I think the all-time great is Transformers the movie, the animated one from '86, which in the year 2005. You're like, what? Oh my god. So yeah, in this movie, I nearly said Schwartzy. Arnold Schwarzenegger plays Ben Richards, who is a cop who's falsely accused of murdering a crowd of innocent people. He's imprisoned. He escapes.
Oh, isn't he like a helicopter pilot?
Yeah. So sorry, but he's still okay. He's a helicopter pilot. He's basically part of the police. He's and they're doing crowd control, and then there's orders like fire on the crowd. He's like, I want that. There's innocent people down there. The women and children. That's the line, isn't it?
There are women and children.
Women and children down there.
McBain.
Yeah, I was going to say that was very McBain rather than
so yeah, he's accused of this crime. Goes on the run. He's imprisoned at first, escapes, keeps very bare minimum. He's captured again, and for entertainment purposes, he is unwillingly put into a popular game show, The Running Man, and he and his friends have to escape whilst also helping an underground movement overthrow the corrupt TV stations, which seem to run the world. It's really bizarre. It's like The Running Man seems to dominate everything, which by the end of the film, you think, not to spoil, but it's like, well, what happens to the world now? Because apparently we all lived for the Running Man. But anyway,
well, wait a minute, like that's like real life now, because like isn't like that show The Masked Singer? Don't we all do that on a Friday night now? We all go out dressed in like costumes.
I don't think I've ever watched that show. I see it trending on Twitter, and it's like you'll see it at the name of someone you remember from like years ago. I was like, I remember that actor. So why are they trending? Oh, they must have died. And it's like, I reckon it's them on The Masked Singer. You're like, what the fuck is this Masked Singer thing? But
it just like the popular culture of like pop stars and Britain's Got Talent and all those. Yeah, X Factor. This predated that in the sense of like it knew that this sort of TV style of TV where people are kind of they have bloodlust watching that. Probably they do, actually, watching Britain's Got Talent and the like. But yeah, that's where a lot of this came from, isn't it?
That kind of, the reality of this, but enhanced by this whole idea that, you have to survive. And these people who most of them they think are criminals, like literally running through this show and being hunted down and killed while they're cheering and screaming. And it's interesting though with this film, because we're quite used to this film now. We've seen many films like it, like The Hunger Games and Battle Royale, and then I guess the most recent thing is Squid Game, which was obviously huge about a year or so ago, and all have very kind of similar they're worlds that are dystopian, and they always kind of have this social commentary of survival of the poor, a look at class and greed and propaganda, corruption and power, and like that is pretty much the same in all of those shows or films.
The highest rated TV show in history.
Guess they want us to stay.
It's a game between life and death.
What I love about this film is there's a lot of, like, especially with the Richard Dawson character, this, the presenter, the big celeb, as it were. It's just
he's
all about,
brilliant in this.
Oh, he's fantastic. It just shows the manipulation, though, and like the power that this TV show. That's all it is. The Running Man is just a TV show, and yet they wield the power. They even say, there's lots of hints. When he first sees Ben Richards, they're looking for contestants for the Running Man, because the previous contestants are pretty much getting offed all the time. So it's like, we need we need some. And he sees this footage of Ben Richards. I think this is when he was first escaping the prison initially. And he's running, and it's Arnie in slow motion running, like, yeah! And he looks all beefy. And Richard Dawson's like, "Get me that guy!" And they're like, "He's wanted for murder, and like he's on the run." And he's like, basically, Richard Dawson is implying that his power goes beyond the government, and he can pull so many favors. And it's like, yeah, but he's just running a TV show. But it's the power, and that's what I love, because it's like we see that in the modern world in a way with TV stations. Controlling the narrative. Yeah. Oh God, what a wonderful. That's a fantastic.
Murdoch and, like Succession and.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's a very kind of comical dystopian look at that, but.
Well, it was off the back of Network as well, wasn't it? Like, Network, I think, was one of the first films to kind of really pull that in.
Do you know what? I've not seen that in such probably when I first saw that was a long time ago, and it was where my mind probably was in the right place to watch it. I think watching it now as an older man, I think I'd have like a really good appreciation of Network now. Before, I thought it was quite a talky film, so I'd love to go back and rewatch it. One thing this film does share parallels with, I thought, and I'd never really appreciated it before, and I think you'll both agree, watching this, it's like this and a certain other movie that came out maybe the same year, could be in the same universe, RoboCop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the
style and
the ads on TV. There's one, was it like Climbing for Dollars and stuff like that? All these adverts on TV that you see in the Running Man, in between shows, when they go now for an ad break, and it's like you could literally see these same ads appearing in RoboCop, because RoboCop was obviously famed for some of those, I'll buy that for $1, all those like wonderful weird TV shows.
It could definitely fit into that universe. I think the other thing with the show, which is so interesting in this, is the colours they use, like with the yellow and the reds and stuff. It's all really bold and that, and then the rest of the world that they're in
is like
so
really
dark,
grim.
And you basically, if you watch this film during the day, you have to shut the curtains, because it's one of those films where it's quite dark. But obviously Arnie dressed in this full lycra suit as well with those colours.
It's time to start running!
So when they actually go into the Running Man course, what they've gone into is basically part of the city that was destroyed by like a big earthquake. And like with Demolition Man, it was the same, where they have this talk about this sort of big earthquake, and I think they go into a museum at one point and kind of discuss that. And it's almost like this underground world that they've sort of built on top of to create the Running Man. But then, like you said, it's even the parts where like Ben Richards at the start is flying over the helicopter, like there's clearly very, very deprived areas, and you see a lot of like the poorer people kind of betting on these shows. Like they're all in the street, there's a big almost like scoreboard, and then you see the contrast between those people and the people kind of in their high-rise flats in their flashy, and as you said, like extremely colourful suits, much like the runners' outfits. And something we've not actually discussed yet as well are kind of the people, the runners that sort of we've mentioned, but the people that are actually chasing the runners and trying to kill them as well, the colours of them and the characters that they bring to the film, it probably makes it more memorable than anything else.
They're like something out of a comic book, and that's the beauty. I think that's why this movie like really appeals to me. Is like, look at the names without like Sub-Zero, Buzzsaw, who's the Fireball,
Captain Freedom,
Dynamo, Captain Freedom. Obviously, yeah. It's just that they're also, you know, wonderfully comic book like. And I think that's what, you know, watching this as like I say, probably a very young teen, maybe like 12, 13. I didn't think it was the best film ever, but I remember thinking this is such a cool film because, you know, back then as well, that kind of level of violence, that 1980s violence, was still coming off the back of like video nasties and stuff. So to see, you know, Buzzsaw wielding a chainsaw, you know, chainsaws were Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a banned film in the UK, and then we're seeing that in a film, an Arnie film, which was like, you know, it was an 18, but it was on general release. It's just like, wow.
The way they do it is really interesting in this film because all the violence is slightly tongue-in-cheek, slightly comical, like you said, like a really good RoboCop comparison, and Starship Troopers, you know, like that kind of like extreme, but not like, oh my god, I'm shocked.
Violence. And it's like the blood's really red, almost like comically red.
Yeah. And I think with this film, it's not just that, you know, all the way through this film, I don't think it ever takes itself too seriously, which the other things I've said about like Battle Royale, Hunger Games, stuff like that, they're all incredibly serious. There is no, we're not capturing any of them in a giant net as they run through an airport, you know.
That is brilliant. Just like
comedy.
It's like just roll over, Arnie, escape, isn't it?
At least I hope it's meant to be funny, because it is.
Well, this is the thing. When Arnie signed up to it, he kind of thought it was going to be a darker film. And I think that the actual director was brought in, and we kind of mentioned he was brought in after it was first kind of proposed. They were going to do it a different way, a different style. And if you go back to the original Bachman book, Stephen King book, whoever you want to call it, the plot sort of differs quite a lot, I would say. Like, for a start, Ben Richards is just an average Joe. He's not this like Arnie machine. And the way it kind of runs through is it's hard to explain sort of succinctly, but essentially there are significant enough differences that you can see that it really kind of got involved in this kind of like 80s style when they made this film. And I think that for Arnie, I mean, it could have been a completely different film, and maybe that's part of the reason why he went on to do something like Total Recall, which again was seen as something like a bit more out there. This ended up being a bit more, for want of a better expression, kind of like middle of the road blockbuster,
like safe.
Safe, it definitely is, and as you said, it has its tongue in its cheek. It's entertaining rather than necessarily like a scathing social commentary, even though that is clearly sort of an undercurrent throughout the entire film. But especially with Richard Dawson being cast, as you said, the presenter, like Killian as he's called, and Arnie and Richard Dawson were like really close friends in real life. So on the one hand, he was happy for him to be involved, but on the other, it almost added to that kind of TV cartoony sort of feel, because I mean, Richard Dawson was primarily known for being a quiz show host, so hence why he was so good at it.
For 50 years, we've told them what to eat, what to drink, what to wear. For Christ's sake, Ben, don't you understand? Americans love television. They wean their kids on it. Listen, they love game shows. They love wrestling. They love sports, violence. So what do? We give them what they want. We're number one, Ben. That's all that counts. Believe me, I've been in the business 30 years.
Well, I haven't been in show business as long as you have, Killian. but I'm a quick learner.
A really well-renowned film critic, Roger Ebert, reviewed and basically said this is kind of the role of his life for Richard Dawson, but sadly it was his last role because he died.
Oh, wow.
It was the last film he actually made. And
Oh, wow.
he leaves such a memorable character in this film, and he's got so many great lines. Like, we were sort of trying to sort of remember some of them earlier, and it's like...
Is this the first film with Arnie's? Because this is where I remember first hearing "I'll Be Back." This was the first time I heard it. Was this the first time it was ever uttered in a film? Was it already been done?
Terminator was before, and they kind of tweaked the script because it was like, "I'll return, and I'll be back later." But it's a brilliant line because he says, "I'll be back," and he turns to him, he's like, "Only in a rerun."
Only in a rerun.
And it's actually it's not even the only in the rerun's great, but it's his reaction because he looks so confused as he says, "I'll be back," and it's almost like it's not a fourth wall break, but it almost feels like
He's
a little bit.
Look
and
at
then
the camera almost, isn't it?
And
yeah.
I remember, like, similarly, because I see Terminator and then seeing this, you're like, oh, you know, Arnie, is this now his catchphrase? Because obviously, you know, Terminator had a few catchphrases. Will this be in pretty much every film?
Was it in Last Action Hero? I think it might have been in a couple of others.
Potentially, he's kind of like brought it back in, you know, recent years.
Killian, I'll be back.
Only in a rerun.
Go!
For me, like, Arnie in this film feels, on purpose, more wooden than he has done in, like, potentially any other film that I've seen him in. And I don't know if that's just, you know, the kind of way he says the lines, and
there's definitely a lot of overdubbing on this. There's definitely a lot of his lines are ADR'd. There's no way, like, you can just hear in certain scenes. It's like, oh no, he isn't being picked up by a boom mic. He's gone back into a thing and done like, Killian, I'll be back. Or just a lot of the dialogue is from, you know. Yeah.
Obviously, in Terminator, you know, he's a machine, so he's meant to be a robot. In
Commando,
you know, his other films, maybe a bit in that. You know, he's obviously not. So in this, maybe it's just because I've just watched it and I hadn't seen an Arnie film in a while. But I kind of felt like, you know, like maybe, and also, like you said, there's so many lines that are basically written for him that it just feels so Arnie.
Yeah, it's a very, like, I've probably watched this far more than Terminator 2, even Predator, you know, as we love Predator, especially in a cinema in London, watching a bunch of muscle-bound men blow up a jungle without...
We're going back in time in the order we are. That's next after this, because it goes Red Heat.
Predator come out after this?
No, going backwards from...
Oh, sorry, you just said back in time, Predator, then there's... I guess, Smith, if you look at stuff like Commando, Predator, and this, it is that is the Arnie kind of character.
I guess so.
The most when you think of Predator, the most kind of, you know, apart from like, I'm here, shoot me, but like when he meets you, son of a bitch.
Do it. No, it's true. It is true. All right.
It's but no, I understand your point there. But I think again, it's that kind of film. This is what I would describe as like an action adventure film. Like Nige said, it hints at social commentary, but it's not going to go down that road because it's a 1980s Arnie film.
Yeah, my big mouth. We should have taken that trip to Hawaii.
I had the shirt for it, but you fucked it up.
Jesus Christ.
Guess again.
We see from time to time the green room where all the stalkers are, and that kind of goes back to where Nigel was talking, where you have that, you know, the dystopian future of the people, like the poor people, betting on the outcome of these games. And then you cut to, like, I mean, you do see the dramatic shift. They do cut between the two, where you see the stalkers, like the ones who have yet to enter the game, as well as, like, I guess, important people all in the green room, all drinking wine and having lots of stars. But the funny thing is, it's like, oh, look how successful, and it's just like they look like they're from the 1980s. There's no getting around that. They look like 1980s.
Well, the thing we haven't really touched upon is the live studio audience that's part of
the old lady.
Which is basically filled with like grannies. Basically, the sort of audience you'd imagine would be on Bullseye is on the running.
Or on one of on Richard Dawson's shows.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or even like Requiem for a Dream, the audience in that is kind of very over the top.
But like one of the funniest bits is like they're giving away like these board games and like little prizes to like the grannies because they get to choose who the stalker is. So like, all right, who do you you want to chase Ben Richards? And they're like, oh, Sub-Zero. And it's like, as he gets closer to killing him, it's like, oh, you almost killed him, then you get a prize. And you just see them like being really chuffed. But where the story kind of shifts a bit further into it is all of a sudden, because Ben Richards and his sort of gang are doing a very good job of evading capture, they start taking out the stalkers, and they're like, well, who do you want to have the next kill? And I think it might be an old lady.
It's like, that old lady. She's like, Ben Richards.
Yeah,
and then they all start betting on them, and the betting guys are like, oh, what do we do? Like,
yeah, and how quickly, like, as it's kind of been shown time and time again, how influential TV can be, and how quickly people's opinions can change based on what they're being shown, whether or not that's factual, because obviously they've got the ability to edit it in a certain way and display it in a certain way and control the narrative.
We need your help. We are looking to grow Off Radar and release more and more high quality content. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pod. And why not share with your friends and loved ones?
Help me help you.
So you've got this underground movement subplot, which is, I think they do a pretty good job of weaving it into the kind of crazy action of the stalkers trying to, off the running men, as it were. And yeah, it's they don't go too deep into it, but it's like, we need to overthrow the network to showcase the truth. And the film culminates with the underground movement. It makes me laugh. Like, here's our edited video. Killian, Richard Dawson's character, is lying to you, and everybody in the audience and at home on TV is like, oh, we've seen a video, it must be the truth. And I think I'm thinking about this now and realizing, oh, that's not really stupid, that's actually quite good, because these people have all been indoctrinated to what they see on TV must be the truth. So the moment someone says Killian is lying to you, they're like, wait, hang on a second. And they show like all these clips of, previous running men that they showed on holiday were actually killed. And
like Arnie, they superimpose his face because Arnie's supposed to be dead. But
that's one of my favourite scenes.
The superimposed face, basically he's fighting Jesse the Body's character, and gets like impaled on some spikes. And it's funny actually, because obviously Jesse the Body and Arnie were together in a film. Obviously Predator, it was as we said earlier, the film before, but at no point in Predator were they allowed to show Schwarzenegger stood next to a full height Jesse the Body, because Jesse towers above him. Well, in The Running Man, they clearly show the sort of distinction in height, and Ventura bosses him around like a rag doll, and it's very, very unusual for Arnie to be in that situation. But only later do you find, oh, that was never Arnie at all, it was someone with their face like superimposed. So Arnie has this little get out of being like, well, it wasn't me getting beaten up by Jesse the Body.
But it's got my favourite moment, I to the point where I took a screen grab of it back, like I feel like about 2014 or something, because it made me laugh so much. When he impales Arnie on the spikes, which is, I remember it was cut out, it probably is still to this day cut out of ITV4 airings. It was quite a violent scene. He pushes Arnie back, and Arnie's, these spikes go through his chest. But what always makes me laugh is when he does it, you have to watch it again, is Jesse Ventura's character, his laugh. He's like right up in the camera, he's like, pushing on the, and Arnie's like, nah, and it cuts to Captain Fred, who's like, ah. It's so good. It's such a funny scene, because he's like covered in blood and beaten.
You should be happy we're officially dead. We can go anywhere, do anything.
No, don't you understand it? They'll never let us out of here alive. They can't afford it.
Well, we may as well go through the wicked assortment of stalkers. So we start off with Professor Sub-Zero is was it not Tanaka? No, what's his name?
It was Professor Toro Tanaka.
Yeah, wasn't he a wrestler at times, or?
Well, he was an actual wrestler. Because his like big move, what he was known for, was throwing salt in the opponent's eyes, which is something Yokozuna and Mr. Fuji did many years later in the WWF. And he was actually sort of served in the US Army. He was a former wrestler, as we said. But in this, he plays. He's an ice skater, isn't he? Who's got
Professor.
Who's got a hockey stick with like a blade on the edge, and also got exploding hockey pucks as well.
Let's get out of here. Come on. Wise, come on. Go.
So then that was Sub-Zero. So Sub-Zero gets off. Actually, one thing about Sub-Zero's death, if anyone's listening, go back and check. When the barbed wire's around his neck and Arnie yanks it, the next shot is Sub-Zero like pulling his hands away and his fingers are all like missing and the blood's spurting from them. And I think either something was cut or something to meet a rating, but I think he had his fingers around the barbed wire. So when Arnie yanked it, it pulls off his fingers. Because if you look, he's holding up his fingers and there's blood squirting out of them. What's left of them. And it's just like, it looks like... Obviously, he gets his neck heavily lacerated, but I think he loses his fingers as well because he looks at his hands and there's just like blood squirting. But that's not really. It doesn't
think they really.
That didn't translate that
attention.
Well.
They were just like, whatever, that'll do. Like,
that'll do.
He's dead. Fine, let's move on. Well, what we haven't actually mentioned as well, we should sort of give a bit of context to this. Like, it's not just Arnie running from these people; it's the two other people, his friends. One of which is like a sort of scientist bod. One's sort of a bit more physical, and he's played by. He's actually like a Bond villain. It's Yapak Koto, who's like the bad guy in Live and Let Die. So really famous for playing Kananga. So he's like the Mr. Big in that film. So I never really clocked that. And he's also in like Alien. He plays Parker in that as well.
Yeah.
So like one of the last people to survive. So I was really surprised to see him in this. But there's also like the love interest, which we haven't mentioned. Like we mentioned her sort of name at the start. Smith, you can pronounce it again if you want. Do you want to give it a second stab? See if you get it right both times.
Smith's looking at his notes. He's like, I don't have the phonetical pronunciation.
Maria Conchita Alonso.
Yes.
Who plays Amber Mendez. And
it's really strange how they first meet, isn't it? Where
it's a great scene.
He's going to meet his brother's apartment, isn't he?
Now, where should we go? Maybe someplace warm. I need to work on my tan anyway. You see, you get so pale in prison. There you are. Good. Now I'm going to untie you. And then you're gonna get dressed. And then you're gonna come with me.
Oh, yeah? Well, why should I?
Because I'm going to say, please.
But obviously, to begin with, she's convinced that he is, killed all these innocent people and stuff because she's seen the news and the TV and stuff. So for a good portion of the film, she thinks he's gonna kill her or rape her, and
But
she's scared.
She works at the TV station as well, doesn't she?
That's the weird part. That's not really.
That's never really. Because she's
there
a lot later on where she goes through some cassettes and stuff, and
she's trying to see what actually
what's
happens.
She doing? Yeah,
she's trying to find the original footage because obviously Ben Richards has said, "Oh, they set me up" and all that kind of stuff, and she's like, "Maybe I'll actually check this out."
Because basically they've deep faked it.
Yeah, she gets busted, sort of seeing the original, and then lo and behold, she ends up in The Running Man as well. So it's Arnie, his two mates, and Amber who are trying to escape these stalkers, and obviously. Even though you think like one-on-one, maybe Ben Richards, like he'll do okay, he's also got to kind of watch out for these other people, but they're also supporting him. So there's there's a couple of times when Ben Richards is like out on his front or like in deep trouble, and these other guys sort of come in and save him. So it's
I do like her character. Like she isn't given much to do in terms of story-wise, but she is one of those. I think because it's just the actress herself. Like she is.
She's a fiery Latina.
She's a presence. Yeah, she's a presence on screen. She's got that kind of, I don't want to say street smarts, but she's not a hapless maiden in the game, even though it would have been far easier to put her in that role. Like she's, she goes off with the nerd guy, and the nerd guy's the one who gets offed by Dynamo. But I do like her role in this. I don't buy into the ending when they just, they live like they kiss, and it's just like, I don't think you needed that. I understand why they did that in a lot of films, and they still do to this day. But like we talked about with Live, Die, Repeat, whatever it was called.
Yeah. I mean, it happens so much in film, especially action films.
You didn't need
ilk, but yeah. Do you fancy sending us a film to review or letting us know your thoughts on a film that we have discussed? All of your comments will be read out in our end of season leaderboard episode. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, message us on Facebook. All links and info in the description down below.
Do it! Do it!
And you're quite right about Arnie, like, he's not always the one killing everyone, or like he does have help in this. He does have like a few people that like his kind of almost like if he's going to war, he's got his crew, like his team with him running this, and she is a massive part of that.
Well, she takes out a fireball, doesn't she? Because she pulls out basically fireballs. Played by Jim Brown, who was like a really famous.
That is Jim Brown, isn't it? Yeah,
it'd be like the equivalent of I don't know, casting Harry Kane as someone.
Maybe someone a bit more beefier, but Sol Campbell. There we
Joey
go.
Barton,
Duncan Ferguson.
But she pulls out like this cable in the back, and then sort of all this sort of fluid spraying everywhere. And when he sort of Arnie does something, and he basically ends up blowing up in this massive fireball, hence the name. But yeah, like
we're not gonna go past that scene without Arnie's line. Hey, fireball, how about a light?
How about a light?
There you go. See.
The funny thing is with the Arnie quotes, like I remember when we worked at a company, myself and Etot worked at, called Cheerful Scout. Back in the day, we had an Arnie soundboard.
They said at a university as well.
Did you have this?
Click the button.
You just click Arnie
We used
quotes.
to do phone calls. We'd ring people up.
Exactly. You ring, but at work we would ring downstairs, and then it would be like, exactly. I'll be back. You're like,
who's your daddy and what does he do?
Who's your daddy?
Shove it, rip it out, and shove it down your spine. But
the other, like going back to the Stalkers, I think my favourite of all the Stalkers is the second, Buzzsaw. I love Buzzsaw because he's just he's terrifying. He's got these bright blue eyes. He looks like an imposing dude.
I'm gonna make it part of you.
That scene with the chainsaw, if you look at how it's shot, it's so hellish. It's wonderful. It's like all reds and the chainsaw's going like right next to Arnie's face, and Arnie's sort of like, you can see the strain. I think it's so well shot, that scene. And then he shoves the chainsaw in between his legs. That's okay, keep it. Pulls the chainsaw up, but then that leads to my favourite Arnie quote of all time, or pun. Where I think I forget who asked him. Is it Maria? And she's like, it's one of the guys. Like, what happened to Buzzsaw? And he's like, he had to split. It's just like that's the all-time great Arnie line. What happened to Buzzsaw? I just chopped him in half. He had to split.
But I think we've left the best to last, really, because my fate. We haven't really discussed Jesse Ventura's character other than he's sort of someone who fights purely. He doesn't want any of these fancy gadgets. He just wants to go in and beat the crap out of someone. The rules of
what is it? Code of the Gladiators.
Exactly. But in terms of like the almost futuristic style one, the most futuristic is Dynamo, who is this like Scandinavian opera singer who's for some reason they've plugged a bunch of like Christmas lights into.
Incredibly camp and the Christmas tree, because that's another Arnie line, isn't it?
That's it. Hey, Christmas tree. That was one of our favourites as well. Hey, Christmas tree.
But he's terrifying in a totally different way, because he has this kind of weird campness and slightly more like slimy.
It's the scene in the corridor.
He's a bit of he's got a little bit rapey, isn't he?
Well, no,
there is a scene, isn't there? Yeah,
that's the scene in the corridor where he bumps into Amber. It's like you see that scene in the corridor, and it's like where he goes from being just a stalker to you're like a horrific creature.
Which is probably why he's one of the most strong, because you really hate this character.
But going back to what I said before, like he's got one of those things where like he'd probably be really awesome if he was just shooting lightning. Instead, they give him a bloody giant car that backfires. It's just like
the car over on a bunch of like rubber bricks.
It's just crap. Oh no, I'm trapped. It's just dear me. Yeah.
I have no power. Cut. Go to commercial.
Kill a helpless human being. Not even sadistic scum like you.
They let him live. And again, like the crowd start booing. They're like, no, just kill him.
Kill him.
Like, wait a minute. like you want him to kill one of the stalkers, and again, it's not long afterwards where they ask who's the next kill going to be, and they say Ben Richards.
I love it with with the audience and stuff like that, where they like zoom in really close, and you're right in their faces, and you feel like you're almost part of that audience. The way it's kind of put together is almost fly on the wall at some moments. It feels really kind of authentic in the way it's kind of reality.
I think you get that the most when you see when they do the opening of The Running Man, the TV show. When you see the opening of the TV show, like
with the dancers and
the dancers,
which the choreography was done by none other than Paula Abdul.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I
did not know that. I love the way that this is set in 2017, but it feels about as 80s as you can get with those dancers, and the music is all very electronic.
Oh yeah,
it's basically like we're gonna pretend it's 2017, but we're not. We're gonna make it into.
We're gonna pretend like 1980s stayed for 2 decades.
It is exactly the same.
Yeah,
but, mankind is dark and that, and then obviously. The sound effects as well. At times they're just like that. The gunfire. It felt like the gunfire is basically one sound effect that's just been repeated throughout the whole film. So it's just like over and over and over again.
I think that comes with the inexperience of the director. Like I mentioned earlier, that Arnie was a bit peeved off, and basically what had happened is that they'd essentially given the film to someone called Andrew Davis to direct. Now he'd kind of been known for I think it was a Chuck Norris film called Code of Silence, and basically after the first 2 weeks of filming they're already a week behind in the schedule, which is obviously not great going, hence why they brought this guy in who was, as you said, like TV background, bit of experience, had a slightly different vision for what they wanted to do, and I think they kind of cut corners in some respects, and like you said, the sound effects is probably one of those areas. But to be fair to Andrew Davis, he did go on to work with Arnie again in the future, doing the wonderful Collateral Damage. So,
oh wow.
Whoops. He also did a bunch of Steven Seagal films, including Under Siege and Above the Law, which is actually not that bad.
And
Chain Reaction with Keanu Reeves, if you're looking for another humdinger.
Yeah. And just on the music as well, obviously, it is basically what it is throughout this film. But
I really like the music in this film, I've got to say.
I don't dislike it, but it's basically of its time. It's so... It's just what it is. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but at the end there's there's basically, like we've seen it so many times, being taken the piss out of the montage type music, where there's a song that I can't remember what the song that plays, and it basically just tells you everything that's just happened.
I love that.
Arnie did some running.
Yeah, it is.
Killed a few bad guys.
This is no game. Standing in the dark, I swear I heard you calling my name.
Trivia night?
Oh, we always need a bit of trivia. Well, I've got some sad trivia and happy trivia.
Oh, okay.
So the sad trivia...
it's Dynamo, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really sad, like Dynamo. So the actor Erland von Leith, who was kind of known, he was in like Stir Crazy, if anyone's seen that, with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. Yeah. He was also in... Well, he wasn't in much, essentially, but what he was an actual opera singer. So, like, he had that ability. It wasn't just something they kind of made up. But he did actually die not long after the film was released from a heart attack, and he was only 34. So he was really
34,
really and he was such a memorable presence on film. So that's kind of trivia. It's just a very sad thing, unfortunately. But yeah, like he'll always have like Dynamo, and as I said, for me, it's like the standout stalker. But like kind of the sort of trivia which really excites me, to be honest. I mentioned earlier on about sort of Richard Bachman, Stephen King, the original book, and how it's so different from this actual film. Well, there's quite a famous film director who a few years back on Twitter kind of was asked, I think it might have just been like a random chat with fans, what film would you really love to sort of remake if you could ever have the chance? And he kind of said The Running Man, like I'd do the book justice. And that director is actually Edgar Wright, who's kind of known for Shaun of the Dead and Scott Pilgrim and films like that. that. And it's actually in production now that they're making this version of The Running Man. And as I said, I've actually read the short story. It's not even a short story, I suppose. It's like a medium length book, I guess. But I really, really enjoyed it. It's probably got a few more parallels to films kind of like They Live, which is something we mentioned earlier. And I would recommend anyone who gets the chance to go and read it. But then if you want to keep things surprised, I'm not going to spoil it for you now because it's a film that's coming out quite soon that none of you had the chance to see. I would, if they do the book justice, I think that would be a film really worth seeing, especially given Edgar Wright's directing.
Yeah, so long as he eases up off the I'm going to time everything to music.
Yeah.
It's like, just make a film. It doesn't have to match the soundtrack every fucking shot.
A million cuts and pans and zooms. So, Etok, you started us. You finish us.
No, you mean you started us. You start the finish. Because if I finished us, I'd be the last person to give a rating.
Okay. Yeah.
He's like a brainy guy gets electrocuted by a dynamo. Let's see where it gets you, Smith.
You start the finish. What is your rating out of 10 on this film? And
so I think there's some nostalgia tied into this film for me. I think the film is obviously very 80s, very of its time, but I really enjoy it, and I think it's, in a way, it's far better than it kind of has any right to be. If you were to ask me like 10, 15 years ago, Running Man, I'd been like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. I've watched it 2 or 3 times since and really enjoyed it. I'm going for 7 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah. I thought you were going to go higher there, actually.
No. So, yeah.
Come on, this is evil Etok with his very. It's very harsh.
I'll go middle for this one.
Top, middle, or bottom? Top, middle, or bottom?
Michael Barrymore on the Running Man UK version.
Oh God, that would be.
There you go.
That would be dark.
What would the name of the store could be called for that incident?
Deadpool.
Pool boy. Deadpool.
Deadpool.
It would be Deadpool.
You better not cut that out. You better not. Right. Smith. Follow that up.
Oh, man.
Oh God, Smith. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think probably like you. Like if you asked me what this rating was, like maybe like 10 years ago, I probably would have been like, Running Man. Probably. Like, I've always really enjoyed it, but I'd probably not put it up there for me with, the Terminator films, Total Recall, Predator. It's not quite on the level of those Arnie films for me. However, I really enjoyed this. I think it's great fun, and I think the fact that Arnie's in it elevates this film. If it wasn't him in this role, I think the film would actually be quite bad. But because it's Arnie, it kind of elevates the humour, it elevates the kind of presence, and like those type of films we all love for very similar reasons. It's like a kind of comic action nostalgia partly, but so I'm up for it. I'm up for watching this again, and it's really enjoyable. Like, the only thing, like, there is part way through where it does lose it for me, and I think is that part where they go into the that whole kind of government conspiracy underground thing. Like, I was just like, I was a bit bored of that, but also I'm not sure what it was, going from one villain to the other. Like, it does get quite repetitive in certain areas in this film, and it is fine. Saying all of that, I still really enjoyed it, so I'm going to agree with you and go for a 7. Nige, bring us home.
Yeah, I'm the final stalker. Well, I think
not for the first time.
That's really dodgy.
No.
So for me, I think you've covered some very good points. So I think objectively, this isn't necessarily like the best film in terms of how it's been put together. We've mentioned there's problems. There's the bizarreness of good old Mick Fleetwood. There's the subplot, which isn't great. There's the kind of beginning and end, which again aren't fantastic. It kind of the bulk of the show, and certainly the most memorable bit of the show, is the actual running segment, and with Richard Dawson being absolutely fantastic. And Arnie, as you said, he's kind of wooden. It's like cheesy throwaway lines, which on the one hand, again, isn't objectively good, but it's almost so bad it's good. So that's what gives it its real charm. And I think there's a reason why it's always on ITV4, because it's so easy to watch. It really is one of those films that you could easily watch 20 minutes at any point And to be honest, it's almost better in those small chunks. This is almost a film that's better watched by just watching clips on YouTube than it is necessarily watching it as a whole, because there's quite a few bits that kind of bring it down, and then the bits that sort of take it really up are, as we said, really memorable, some great lines. But yeah, like, I don't fall very far from where you two guys have fell on this. Like, there's that nostalgia thing, the easy to watch, the sort of the undercurrent of the trying to be something more than it is. I wish they'd maybe done that a little bit better. As I mentioned, I'm really interested to see what they do with the original source material. But for this film, I'm going to go 7 out of 10 as well. So,
wow.
Yeah, I think it's not very often we have a unanimous rating for a film.
We've got.
I don't think we.
I can't remember.
I don't think we ever have.
The time where we've literally agreed on pretty much everything. 7 out of 10. And I wonder what IMDb gives it. There's an interesting...
Imagine if that gave it like the average of 7 out of 10. I'd be bloody amazed.
It's actually a 6.6.
Oh, it's not far off.
But males aged between the ages of 39 to... No.
I guarantee.
I mean, it's a good point though. You know, if you watch this and you're 20, you might not get this film because of the kind of time and stuff, but... Yeah, I mean, and guys, what do you think of The Running Man? Get in touch, email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, and give us your rating or let us know a film to review and rate and watch in the future. Did you know you can now subscribe to Off Radar? It's a movie podcast on YouTube. You can watch exclusive trailers and listen to brand new full episodes. All links and info in the description down below.
Somebody stop me!